Heavy music and video games go hand in hand, all the way back to chiptunes trying to sound like metal, custom soundtracks being made by musicians like Trent Reznor for Quake, or what we are focusing on today with awesome rock and metal soundtracks in video games. There are tons out there that deserve some attention. There will be many comments arguing which ones are the best and which ones were missed, so leave a comment of your favorite video game that had a killer rock and metal soundtrack. This video is mostly going to be focusing on soundtracks that go with the game, not original scores like Trent Reznor and Quake, or just generally great soundtracks from franchises like Final Fantasy or something. This video is for soundtracks consisting of music from bands many people already know. This is not a top 10, no ranking, just a list of good game soundtracks. You know how these videos work, let's get to it. Starting with the game I most remember having an amazing soundtrack while being an amazing game on PlayStation 1. The entire Tony Hawk Pro Skater franchise is a worthy mention for each entry, but I'm going with Pro Skater 2 as having the best overall soundtrack due to variety and impact across the board. Just the opening video sequence with Guerrilla Radio from Rage Against the Machine was enough to catch your attention. There was variety from hip-hop to metal, grunge, new metal. Tony Hawk was great at capturing popular music at the time, and great songs from the early 90s through different subgenres. Pro Skater 2 included Rage Against the Machine, Bad Religion, Papa Roach, Power Man 5000, Anthrax, and Public Enemy, and more, including Lagwagon's May 16th, which might be the group's biggest hit, which was solely known from this PS1 classic. I mean, anyone getting on a Tony Hawk game is a massive accomplishment anyway. I'd be proud of that. When they did remake 1 and 2, they kept as much music on the updated game as possible. That was appreciated, especially when you beat the game and get the fail compilation to Rage. Seriously, that was some violent stuff. There's going to be arguments over which GTA has the best soundtrack, including a past decade game or one in the main series like 4 or 5. While this is not my favorite game in the series, I stand by that GTA San Andreas had the best soundtrack overall. Pound for pound, this was the beefiest and strongest playlist for video game debauchery. Of the many radio stations you can choose from in the game, I'm focusing on Radio X as it had the biggest collection of rock and alternative that was huge in the 90s. Grand Theft Auto had a classic rock station as well, but I think Radio X had a better fit for a retro soundtrack in the early and mid 90s for San Andreas setting. This GTA version featured Rage, Soundgarden, Faith No More, Stone Temple Pilots, Living Colour, Depeche Mode, Jane's Addiction, Ozzy Osbourne, and much more. So much more, it's too hard to list here. I feel like Rockstar knew their audience in 2004 well if they put into their 90s game to do GTA level stuff while blasting Soundgarden and Faith No More. I just feel that they knew what the kids who played the first few GTAs on PS1 were doing with a CD player and just built that into the PS2 game. Speaking of debauchery in video games, the Saints Row franchise could hold their own in mature-rated video game content and having a killer soundtrack across genres. I have to say, the 2022 release probably has the best version of the soundtrack across the board. I've never played through a Saints Row game in entirety, and even I can say Saints Row definitely held their own in both soundtrack and trying to match what GTA was doing while sometimes going overboard for the sake of going overboard and not so much telling a story as just being insane. Saints Row 2022 included Slayer, Cataclysm, Hatebreed, Meshuggah, Sylosis, Idols, White Reaper, Iggy Pop, and tons more ranging from indie and alternative all the way to thrash and hardcore. Between the Nuclear Blast and Root Overdrive stations alone, you had a great soundtrack range. I'm glad that Saints Row also did what GTA did with half different stations so you can choose what style of music you want to listen to. Also, Saints Row had a lot of way too inappropriate stuff for kids, but kids still played this game anyway. I'm not Mr. Prude on this, but dang, kids playing Saints Row, that's pretty bad. Racing games and rock music really mesh perfectly as you are supposed to go as fast as possible, so why not listen to something that raises your pulse as well? The Burnout franchise understood that and went out of their way to jam-pack these games with huge soundtracks that would make Spotify playlists blush. Burnout was one of the games in 2004 where the graphics were hyper-realistic at the time in PS2, and you saw that through brutal airborne crashes while My Chemical Romance and Jimmy Eat World were playing full volume. High-end racing graphics and emo music while you're crashing was the peak 2004 experience. Burnout 3 includes the Ramones, My Chemical Romance, Jimmy Eat World, Fall Out Boy, Rise Against, Newfound Glory, Motion City soundtrack, Pennywise, and lots more. Almost one song per choosable car in this game, and for Burnout, that is saying something. The Burnout franchise was also great at giving those lesser-known bands a spot. Maybe it's because those songs were cheaper to pay for rights, or because they love the tracks. Either way, these songs help make crash mode more challenging because you want to drive as fast as possible, and somehow hearing emo music blast while you're crashing a car in crash mode, man oh man, it's just so poetic. Continuing the trend and paying some tribute to the Need for Speed franchise, I remember being in high school working at Best Buy when Most Wanted came out and seeing it demoed in the game section. Even then, I recognized how strong the soundtrack was that blasted out of bad TV speakers. Need for Speed normally had a star-studded soundtrack, especially as the technology evolved. This was my favorite driving franchise, and with the better racing and graphics, the soundtracks evolved also to include unique artists as well as big names. Not just heavy music either, but Need for Speed definitely made room for it though, which I appreciate. Most Wanted included Avenged Sevenfold, Disturbed, Mastodon, The Prodigy, Static X, Cell Dweller, Bullet for My Valentine, and a variety of other artists and subgenres. It's a who's who playlist in 2005. I mean, there's an argument it's a good playlist for the present as well. It was fun working in the media section and hearing The Prodigy and Static X blast out of those overhead TV demos while a kid repeatedly tried to crash a car in this game. Those public display games were great in-work entertainment.
Light 'em up, boys.
Speaking of trying to crash a car, Twisted Metal will never get old to me. Even the old games that handled rough on PS1 were a blast. The PS2 update was fun, and then they renewed Twisted Metal on PS3. They decided to expand everything from carnage to a heavy soundtrack and original score. Twisted Metal wanted both. Twisted Metal and metal go hand in hand. I mean, having cartoonish and demented Demolition Derby without the heavy music is just not the same. You cannot play as Grim or Sweet Tooth without Rob Zombie or Judas Priest playing over it. It's unnatural. I mean, so is this unhinged game, but my point still stands. Twisted Metal 2012 included Rob Zombie, White Zombie, Shinedown, Sammy Hagar, Sepultura, Avenged Sevenfold, Judas Priest, Wolfmother, and plenty more, along with rap tracks and the custom score built into the game. Again, Twisted Metal didn't choose score or soundtrack, they wanted both. With the new Twisted Metal TV series, I feel it's time for a new game on PS5. I also feel that soundtrack should be filled to the brim with angry rock and metal, as well as just having Rob Zombie as a playable character in the Dragula car. With current-gen graphics and sound, it'd be amazing. Pro wrestling has always pulled in rock and metal for entrance music and for selling shows with background music. Go to any indie show in the United States and you'll hear everything from obscure metal to Guns N' Roses' Welcome to the Jungle. And the WWK 2K series did some fun stuff with their soundtracks. After many years of curating soundtracks, 2K would ask several wrestlers to contribute a song to their overall soundtrack, along with many other standards that people know. This way, it's a guaranteed fresh list every year, while showing off a few artists and what wrestlers are choosing. That's one good thing those games have done. I'm not a fan of the current gameplay for the past few years, just the soundtracks though. Those are good. My favorite example being WWE 2K19, including Slipknot, Metallica, Bullet for My Valentine, Shinedown, Motorhead, Alter Bridge, Joan Jett, Rancid, and other names from hip hop and pop as well. Regardless of the 2K game and plethora of glitches, the soundtracks usually hold up, and 2K19 had a great year musically. I mean, come on, it even had AJ Styles on the cover. He's great. Blasting Motorhead and Slipknot to AJ Styles matches, that has to be fun to play. I mean, it has to be better than the AEW game. Some of you might be saying out loud while watching this, I hate WWE. Okay, fine, because there were other ridiculous wrestling games out there with killer soundtracks. The descriptions, ridiculous and killer, both aptly describe Backyard Wrestling 2, There Goes the Neighborhood. It was a weird time for wrestling. 1. Any game that has New Jack and Violent J as playable wrestlers is absolutely setting a low bar for quality. 2. This game sold surprisingly well for how over the top it was. 3. The soundtrack was massive and had a ton of fun songs from big name bands through the years. I think most of the budget went to music licensing. Backyard Wrestling 2, yes, it's as wild as it sounds, included Andrew WK, Bad Brains, Body Count, Chimera, Clutch, Dropkick Murphys, Lamb of God, Gwar, and many more. That wasn't even half the list of songs included in a backyard wrestling game. Fun fact, Eidos, the company behind this game, also made the original Tomb Raider series. So Lara Croft walked so Violent J and New Jack could run in a backyard, hitting each other with things while blasting Andrew WK. If you weren't around in 2004 for that time frame, you would not understand how perfectly that all fits. I was not aware of Metal Hellsinger until a year after it came out, and I missed out on an amazing metal-filled rhythm shooter. Available on the current generation of gaming systems, this game is part Doom, part metal soundtrack, with tons of collaborations and surprisingly amounts of ridiculously fun shooting, and the best part, some of the band's singers are voiceovers in the game. Metal Hellsinger has the unknown, trying to recover her memories and her song through blasting their way through enemies in hell to the rhythm of a custom metal soundtrack. The game feels like it was built from the soundtrack soundtrack backwards and it still worked because you played for the music experience. Shoot along with Metal Hellsinger to Lamb of God, System of a Down, Trivium, Ginger, Arch Enemy, Soilwork, DLC from Lacuna Coil and Lorna Shore, and then even more DLC added later. Metal Hellsinger had a massive list of music to work with. In the game's canon, you can argue that the Unknown heard all of these songs in their head while shooting. That's intense to think about. That's pretty metal. Not sure why enemies and objects would fly in front of her shooting rhythm, but ignore some character logic because the game is still fun.
To become a legend.
Ending with what many people did not give a chance in 2009 when the game was released. Video game legend Tim Schafer teamed up with Jack Black to create a new third-person hero-based game where a guitar tech transports to a heavy metal-themed world. It's as cheesy as it is amazing, which Jack Black is perfect for. The soundtrack for this game was nothing short of spectacular, paying tribute to metal past and present as of 2009. The game was over the top in raunchiness and violence, but for every dumb cliche of metal and fantasy, you also got great music throughout the game, with tons of replay value in the game and soundtrack as well. Brutal Legend included Judas Priest, Ozzy Osbourne, Lita Ford, Scorpions, Mastodon, Cradle of Filth, In Flames, Static X Slayer, and Motorhead, also featuring characters from some of these bands, including Lemmy. I mean, Lemmy is the personification of a video game character musician in real life, so it works perfectly for him to do voiceovers. It's still wild to me that Brutal Legend did not sell well in its first year of release. Developers had trouble advertising the gameplay and only focusing on Jack Black and the music. Meanwhile, almost every band on the soundtrack had sales increase due to being featured. The game eventually gained a cult following, as did many Tim Schafer games, and Jack Black once again saved the world through music. That's a theme for him. Again, there are way more than 10. If this video does well, then I can try for a part 2 somewhere down the road. It's my hope that more current generation games still utilize killer soundtracks and help bands get noticed through a song. I know I did not include many of the Madden or NHL soundtracks over the years, even though many of them could have been listed, but that would require me to give some credit to EA Sports, and I'm not sure how I feel about that.